Mornings in my life always start the same way. 78 years old, I still wake up at 6 in the morning, even without an alarm clock. Veta always laughed at this peculiarity of mine. Lloyd, she used to say, even when you die, your body will habitually get up at 6. I guess she was right. 42 years of marriage hadn't gone by without a trace. She knew me better than I knew myself. I struggle to get out of bed, feeling my joints ache. Arthritis is a faithful companion of old age, silent and insistent, like a creditor. It never forgets to make its presence known, especially on those dank fall days when Great Falls is covered with a dense fog. I put on an old blue robe and go into the kitchen. My house hasn't been cozy for a long time, not since Veta passed away, 5 years ago. Sometimes I feel like it happened yesterday. Sometimes it's like another life. My son, of course, thinks otherwise. To Grant, her death was just further proof of my failure. If you'd insisted on a different treatment, how many times have I heard him say that? I put the kettle on and look out the window. The house opposite has recently been bought by a young couple. They are always renovating something, planting, building. I like watching them. They remind me of Veta and me when we first moved to this neighborhood. Great Falls was different then, quieter, greener, and the people were different. The kettle whistles, snapping me out of my memories. It's Sunday, which means a visit with my son. It's a tradition that started after Veta died. I don't know if it was me or Grant who came up with it, but it stuck. Every second Sunday of the month, I go to their house for dinner. To call it a family dinner would be too optimistic. It's more like a regular reminder that we are still connected by blood, although my son would prefer it not to be. Breakfast was oatmeal and half a grapefruit. Veta always watched my diet. After she died, I tried to eat convenience foods, but a long-standing habit proved stronger. My stomach refused to accept all those chemical flavors. So I went back to the simple food I make myself. After breakfast, I pull out my file folder. It's become my little ritual before meeting my son to check on the status of his affairs. Not that he knows about it. In his mind, I'm an old man out of his mind who can barely pay his own bills. If only he knew. I'm opening the report Garth sent me last week. Garth Prescott is my lawyer, and probably the only person besides Trelawney who knows the whole truth. Weatherby's Transportation Solutions, Grant's company, is down again, 3rd quarter in a row. If it weren't for my regular infusions disguised as investments from non-existent business angels, the firm would have gone bankrupt long ago. I sigh and close the folder. It's time to pack. Grant hates it when I'm late. Although, to be fair, Grant hates pretty much everything I do. I dress slowly, choosing the most decent of my old shirts. Patty, Grant's wife, always cringes when she sees me in shabby clothes. "Can't you buy something new, Lloyd?" she asks with that peculiar intonation that turns any question into an accusation. I always feel like replying that I could buy not only a new shirt, but the entire mall where she buys her outfits. But I don't. I always stay silent. The drive to my son's house takes 40 minutes by bus. I could call a cab, but the habit of saving money is too deeply ingrained. Besides, the bus gives me a chance to observe the city, the people. I like to watch young mothers with their children, teenagers with their perpetual headphones, old people just like me, but perhaps with happier family lives. Grant's house, 2 stories with a neat lawn and a 2-car garage, is in what is considered a respectable neighborhood in Great Falls. Not luxurious, no. Grant's earnings wouldn't be enough for that, but decent enough for neighbors to nod respectfully when they met. They'd bought the house 5 years ago, shortly after Veta's death. And though Grant will never admit it, I made most of the down payment. Through Garth, of course. So my son wouldn't suspect a thing. I ring the doorbell and wait. Usually Patty opens it, with a strained smile and a quick glance at her watch to see if I'm late. But today it's Grant himself who opens the door, and I can tell from his red eyes that he's already started. "Here you are," he says instead of greeting me, stepping aside to let me through. He smells like whiskey. 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, I guess tonight's dinner is going to be especially warm. "Hello, Grant," I say, walking into the hallway. "How are you?" He snorts, as if I've said something incredibly stupid. "Excellent. Just perfect." "Come on in." Patty's setting the table. I follow him into the living room, trying to ignore his unsteady gait. Grant is tall, broad-shouldered, with thick, dark hair that's just beginning to show gray. He didn't look anything like me, but he was the same as his mother. All he got from me was a stubborn chin, and unfortunately, a tendency to self-deceive. Patty is indeed setting the table. She nods at me, not even a smile, and continues setting the plates. She's 49, but she looks younger. Dyed blonde hair, trim figure, expensive clothes. She works in the personnel department of the city administration, and this job gives her a sense of self-importance, which she demonstrates at every opportunity. "Good afternoon, Patty," I say. "What can I do for you?" "Nothing, Lloyd," she replies without looking up. "Just sit down. Lunch will be in 15 minutes. I sit down in the chair by the window, the one that's already tacitly considered mine. Grant sits across from me, glass in hand. I notice that the glass is almost empty and mentally prepare myself for what happens when he fills it again. "How's your business?" I ask, even though I know the answer. Grant wrinkles his nose like he's got a sudden toothache. "It's okay. Not that you're really interested." "Why do you say that?" "Of course I'm interested." "Come on, Dad. The only thing you've ever been interested in is your damn numbers and reports. People have always come second to you, even Mom. This is it." Less than 5 minutes, and we're here. I'm gripping the armrests of my chair, but I keep a calm expression on my face. "Your mother has always come first for me, Grant. I've done everything I could to—" "Mom, everything you could?" he interrupts, his voice getting louder. "You didn't even want to take her to that clinic in Mayo. The doctors said she would have had a chance there." "That's not true." "That's not what the doctors said. They said the tumor was inoperable, that it had already metastasized to the bones, and that no clinic in the world could help her." But Grant didn't want to hear it then, and he doesn't want to hear it now. He wants someone to blame, and he's assigned that role to me. "Grant, honey," Patty intervened, setting the salad bowl on the table. "Let's not get started. You promised." He takes a swig of whiskey and sets it down on the table with a clatter. I know I promised, but he comes here, sitting in my house, asking about my business like he gives a shit. "Please don't express yourself," Patty says quietly, glancing in my direction. "It's not my state of mind that bothers her, of course. It's just that she's always afraid the neighbors will hear Grant screaming. Reputation comes first." "Why don't we have lunch?" I suggest as I rise from my chair. "It smells delicious, Patty." She nods, but I see the same contempt in her eyes that I see in my son's. To her, I'm a burden, an old man who somehow is still alive and ruining their lives with his presence. We sit down at the table. Grant pours himself another whiskey, ignoring his wife's expressive stare. I set my salad down and try to look interested in eating, though my appetite is long gone. "Have you heard of the Tuckers?" Patty asks, apparently deciding to change the subject. "Their son was in a car accident last week." "No, I haven't heard," I answer. "I hope he's all right." "Broke his leg and his arm, bike's totaled. But the Tuckers are just happy he's alive. Do you know how much it costs to get a good treatment nowadays? They mortgage the house to pay all the bills." I nod, realizing where she's going with this. This is another one of their favorite topics, my stinginess. The fact that I don't throw money around for their whims is tantamount to a crime in their eyes. "Medicine is really expensive these days," I say neutrally. "Exactly," Grant says. "And you're sitting on your pension like Scrooge McDuck, doing nothing to help your family." I could have told him I paid for his car repairs just a month ago, and a new roof on his warehouse 3 months ago, and saved his company from bankruptcy when a big client backed out of a contract last year. But he doesn't know that, and he doesn't have to, not yet. I do what I can, Grant, I say. But my pension isn't as big as you think it is. Of course it is, he snorts. You've always been a financial genius. Only for some reason, all the money kept passing me and Mom by. Remember when you refused to pay for my college? Earn your own money, son. It's good for your character. And the truth is, you just didn't want to spend your precious savings. I wouldn't pay for his college because he was skipping classes in high school and drinking even then. I offered him a deal. If he made his own money for the first semester and performed well, I would pay for the rest. He didn't last 3 months at his job at the auto repair shop, said it was beneath him. So he dropped out without ever trying to enroll. I've always believed that independence is an important quality, I say, and I'm proud of what you've accomplished on your own. That's not really a lie. I'm really proud that he's at least tried to build his own business instead of wasting away in bars. Without my help, though, his company would have fallen apart a long time ago. Grant laughs, but there's not an ounce of mirth in that laugh. What have I accomplished? Do you know how many problems my company has? Customers are late on payments, drivers are demanding pay raises, competitors are dumping, and you sit there with your smug look and talk about pride? I didn't mean to upset you, I say, feeling every muscle in my body tense. Maybe I could help with the financial planning. After all, I do have experience. Your experience? He refills his glass again. Your experience of counting every penny and denying your family everything? No, thank you. Patty puts her hand on his forearm, but he shakes it off. Grant, maybe we shouldn't, she begins. It's yes, he almost shouts. He comes here every 2 weeks, looking at us with his sad eyes, pretending to be a caring father. But really, he's just checking to see if I'm still alive so he can avoid the funeral expenses. I know it's better not to say anything right now. With Grant in this state, anything I say will only fuel the fire. But today, something inside me is breaking. You're not being fair, Grant, I say, quietly but firmly. I've always wanted the best for you, and I've done everything I could to help you. Easy. Help? He jumps up, knocking over his chair. You call that helping? Where were you when Mom was dying? Where were you when I needed a father and not a goddamn calculator in human form? Where were you when my business almost collapsed last year? I was there for your mother every minute of her illness, I think. I held her hand when she was dying. I tried to be a father, but you pushed me away as soon as you learned to say no. And I'm the one who saved your business last year by transferring enough money into the company account to buy a small island. But all I say out loud is, I'm sorry you feel that way, son. Don't call me son, he barks, and I see Patty flinch. You have no right to call me that after all you've done. Or rather, you didn't. He grabs the bottle of whiskey and pours himself another, spilling the liquid onto the tablecloth. Patty presses her lips together but remains silent. Maybe I should leave, I say, rising from the table. I don't think it's a good day for a family dinner. Ah, family? Grant lets out a laugh that sounds more like a sob. What the hell family? You ruined our family when you let Mom die. Grant, please, Patty whispers, but he ignores her. You know what I think? He continues, pointing his finger at me. I think you should go to a nursing home. I think you belong in a nursing home, among the same useless old people who only know how to complain and count their miserable savings. We're not talking about that now, Patty hissed, giving me a startled look. And then I realized what she was saying. They had discussed it. They were actually planning to send me to a nursing home, without my knowledge or consent. You think I don't see you looking at my house? Grant continues, his face contorted with anger and alcohol. You think I don't realize you're waiting for me to collapse so you can say, and I warned you? You think I don't know you're asleep and see me crawling to you on my knees asking for help? I remained silent, shocked not so much by his words, I'm used to them, but by the realization of what they were really up to. Get out of my house, Grant suddenly shouts, throwing the glass at the wall. The glass shatters and I flinch. You ruined my life. You've always ruined everything. Get out. Patty jumps up and grabs his arm, trying to calm him down, but he pushes her away with such force that she almost falls. Grant, the neighbors, is all she can say. I don't care about the neighbors, he shouts. Let them know that my father is a heartless son of a bitch who let my mother die and now pretends to be a caring daddy. I slowly rise from the table. For the first time in all these years, I feel no pain from his words, only fatigue and a strange relief, as if something had resolved itself. Goodbye, Grant, I say quietly. I won't bother you anymore. He looks at me with a hatred that would burn if I had any hope left that our relationship could be salvaged. Get out, he repeats, and don't come back. I nod, grab my coat, and walk out of the house. As the door slams behind me, I hear the sound of more broken glass and Patty's scream. Standing on the porch of their house, I feel strangely calm. I know what I have to do. The plan that has been brewing in me for years is finally taking shape. I'll call Garth tomorrow, and Trelawney. It's time to prepare a surprise for my son. A surprise that will make him realize who's been keeping his life and business afloat all this time, and what happens when that support is gone. The next morning greeted me with the same dank grayness as the day before. It was as if nature itself reflected my state of mind. I sat at the window with a cup of cold tea and watched the fog slowly spread through the streets of Great Falls, shrouding the houses and trees in a ghostly shroud. The events of last night played over and over in my head like a broken record. You ruined my life. Get out. How many times had I heard such accusations from Grant over the years? Dozens? Hundreds? But something was different yesterday. Maybe it was the fact that it was the first time I'd seen their plan in its entirety, to send me to a nursing home, sell my house, and probably use the proceeds to solve Grant's financial problems. I set my cup on the windowsill and reached for the phone. It was only 7 o'clock in the morning, but I knew Garth was already awake. My lawyer had always been an early bird, just like me. Garth Prescott here, he answered after the second ring. Garth, it's Lloyd Weatherby. Sorry for the early call. Lloyd? There was genuine surprise in his voice. Is something wrong? You don't usually call this early. I need to see you. Today, if possible. There was a short pause. Of course, he said at last. I have an 11 o'clock window. Would that work? Perfect. Thanks, Garth. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. Part of me still doubted the rightness of what I was about to do. Would it be too cruel? Wouldn't it finally end even the theoretical possibility of reconciliation with my son? But then I remembered the look on Grant's face when he'd yelled at me, and the way Patty had shushed him at the mention of the nursing home. They weren't just discussing it, they'd already made a decision, behind my back, about my life. No, I'm doing the right thing. It's time to stop this one-gate game. Time to show Grant what it means to be left without the support he's relied on so much without even realizing it. After a quick breakfast, I called Trelawney. Unlike Garth, she was definitely not a lark, and I knew I risked waking her up. But it couldn't wait. Her sleepy voice confirmed my fears. Trelawney, it's Lloyd. I'm sorry to wake you. Lloyd? She woke up instantly. Is something wrong? Are you okay? Physically, yeah. Mentally, not so much. I need to talk to you. Can I come by your place tonight after I see Garth? Say, 1 o'clock? Sure, she sounded worried now. I'll bake a blueberry pie, the kind you like. I smiled involuntarily. Trelawney always knew how to cheer me up. Thank you. I'll see you later. I spent the next few hours organizing any paperwork Garth might need. Bank statements, contracts, powers of attorney, all the things that had allowed me to quietly keep Grant's business afloat for the past 10 years. It started shortly after Veda's death. Grant, who had abused alcohol before, started drinking even more. His small transportation company, which he had so enthusiastically founded the year before his mother's illness, began to make losses. Small ones at first, at the level of statistical error, then more and more. By the end of the first year after Veda's death, Grant's business was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. I couldn't let that happen. Not because I believed in his entrepreneurial talent. By then, I realized my son wasn't cut out for business. But I knew that the collapse of the company would finally break him. And Veda wouldn't want that. So I went to Garth and we worked out a scheme. I started investing in my son's business through a chain of shell companies without disclosing the source of the funds. Garth had been told about the emergence of anonymous investors interested in developing regional transportation companies. He believed it because he wanted to believe it. He needed to think that his business was attractive to investors, that he was a successful entrepreneur, not a loser being secretly rescued by his own father. Over time, my support became more systematic. I didn't just pour money in when the next financial hole appeared. I actually ran the company through trustees, a CFO, and a chief accountant I recommended to Grant without mentioning that they were primarily accountable to me. I paid for equipment repairs, insurance, tax debts. I even covered Grant's personal debts when his addiction to alcohol and gambling led to crises. And all the while, he continued to treat me with contempt, accusing me of being stingy, of not helping him when he needed help. At precisely 11 o'clock, I walked into Garth Prescott's office. His secretary, an older woman with attentive eyes behind thick glasses, smiled welcomingly at me. "Good morning, Mr. Weatherby. Mr. Prescott is expecting you." Garth met me at the door of his office. A tall, trim man of 65, with thinning gray hair and a penetrating gaze. We'd met back in college and had maintained a friendly relationship over the years. He was one of the few people who had come to Veda's funeral not out of politeness, but out of genuine sympathy. "Lloyd," he shook my hand firmly. "Come in, have a seat. You don't look so good, I must say." "Tough night," I replied, sinking into the comfortable leather chair across from his desk. "Grant again?" I nodded, and Garth sighed. He knew all too well the history of my relationship with my son. What was it this time? He kicked me out of the house, said I'd ruined his life, and demanded I get out. Garth frowned. "And you decided?" "I decided to show him what it was like to be without my support," I finished the sentence. "It's time to stop this comedy, Garth. I want to change all the paperwork, cut off the funding, take back control of the company officially." My friend leaned back in his chair, looking at me intently. "Are you sure, Lloyd? It's a big step. Grant may not survive this blow." "He will," I answered with a confidence I didn't really feel. "He's tougher than he looks. And maybe this will finally make him grow up." Garth rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "What exactly do you want to do?" "First, stop all current financial injections. Second, officially declare my ownership of the controlling interest in Weatherby Transportation Solutions. Third, initiate an audit of the company to uncover any financial irregularities I'm sure we'll find. And finally, I want to rewrite the will." That last point clearly surprised Garth. "Rewrite your will? But you don't have any other heirs besides Grant." "I do now." I pulled an envelope out of my pocket and handed it to him. "Here are the contacts of several charitable organizations to which I want to leave most of my fortune. Grant will get only the house and a small amount of money in the account, enough to keep him off the streets, but not enough to continue his wild lifestyle." Garth took the envelope slowly, still looking at me questioningly. "That's a very drastic solution, Lloyd. Don't you want to take a break? Take a couple more days to think about it?" I've been thinking about it for the last 5 years, Garth, ever since Veta passed. And yesterday, the cup of my patience ran dry. She and Patty are planning to put me in a nursing home. I paused to deal with the sudden bitterness. Without my knowledge or consent, they were talking about it, thinking I couldn't hear. Garth turned pale. Are you sure? Absolutely. Patty tried to shut Grant up when he blabbed, but it was too late. I've got it all figured out. My friend shook his head. It's illegal, you know. They can't forcibly place you in an institution without your consent if you're capable. And you are, thank God, more than competent. I know. But the fact that they discussed it, I didn't finish my sentence, but Garth understood. All right, he said after a long pause. I'll make all the necessary arrangements. But let me give you some advice as a friend, not as a lawyer. Don't make a final decision today. Give yourself at least a week. If in 7 days you're still sure, we'll start the process. I thought about it. Garth was right. You don't make decisions like this in haste, especially at my age. Okay, I finally agreed. 1 week. But in the meantime, get all the paperwork ready. Okay, he made a note in his day planner. By the way, have you found a place to live? If you're not going back to your house, I'm staying at Trelawney's for now, I said. Then we'll see. An understanding smile flickered across Garth's face. Trelawney's, then. Well, tell her I said hello. I felt myself blush like a teenager. Ridiculous at 78. We're just friends, Garth. Oh, sure. His smile grew wider. Whatever you say. Leaving Garth's office, I decided to walk around the city for a while. I had about 2 hours before my meeting with Trelawney, and fresh air always helped me get my thoughts in order. Great Falls had changed since Veta and I had moved here in the early 60s. The city had grown, new neighborhoods had sprung up, and the old buildings downtown had given way to modern malls and office buildings. But you could still feel the spirit of that time in some corners. The little cafes that had been around for decades. The park with the huge maples planted in the 50s. The old library where Trelawney had once worked. That's exactly where I headed, to the library. Not so much to read, but to be quiet, among the books and the memories. Veta loved this place. The three of us, she, me, and little Grant, often came here to pick out books for the weekend. Grant loved stories about pirates and treasure. Veta preferred novels. I chose popular science fiction or biographies. Now, walking between familiar shelves, it was as if I could see their ghosts. Young Veta, smiling, with a book in her hands. Grant, sitting on the floor in the children's literature section, fully immersed in another adventure. When did it all go wrong? When did my cheerful boy turn into an embittered man, blaming me for all his troubles? Veta's illness was a watershed in our relationship with Grant. Before that, there had been tension between us, but no open hostility. We were just very different people. I was methodical, cautious, used to planning every move. He was impulsive, living for the moment, not thinking about the consequences. Veta was the bridge between us. She understood both of us, was able to smooth over sharp corners, find compromises. When she was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer, our world fell apart. Grant reacted with anger at the disease, at the doctors, at the world, and ultimately at me. He demanded that we drive Veta to every clinic possible, try every experimental treatment without regard for cost or her own wishes. Veta wanted to spend the rest of her time at home, with her family, not confined to a hospital bed. She accepted her diagnosis with the same calm courage with which she had lived her entire life. And I supported her decision, despite Grant's protests. "You just don't want to spend the money," he shouted at me. "You always didn't care about Mom, about all of us." At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I rang the doorbell of the Trelawney house, a neat one-story cottage in a quiet Great Falls neighborhood. She opened almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting at the door. "Lloyd!" She wrapped her arms around me, and I let myself melt into her warmth for a moment. "Come in. I've got tea ready." And the cake, like I promised. We settled in the kitchen, and I told her all about yesterday's scandal, about today's meeting with Garth, about my decision to show Grant the truth. "Are you sure that's a wise decision?" she asked when I was done. No, I answered honestly. But I'm sure it's a necessary decision. For too long, I've let him live in a fantasy world where he's a successful businessman, and I'm a stingy old man who refuses to help him. It's time to tear off the masks. Trelawney stirred her tea thoughtfully. "How do you think he'll react? At first, he'll be furious. Then, when he realizes that his company is on the verge of bankruptcy, maybe he'll try to make up with me. For money, of course, not for a relationship. But by then it will be too late. I'm not going back to the old scheme. And what will happen to the company? If Grant finds the strength to change, it's his. If not, I'll sell it and invest the money in charity." Trelawney shook her head. "Harsh, but fair. Veta would understand, I think. She'd always wanted Grant to grow up and take responsibility for his life." I nodded, feeling a lump rise to my throat at the mention of my wife's name. You know what the saddest part is? I'm really proud of him for at least trying to build his business. It was the right thing to do. If only he'd put as much energy into the business as he did into charges and alcohol, the company could have really thrived. "I know," Trelawney said softly. "You always wanted only the best for him. It's a shame he can't see that." We sat in cozy silence, drinking tea and eating the blueberry pie that Trelawney had baked especially for me. It was drizzling outside the window, but the kitchen was warm and quiet. "I told Garth I'd stay with you for a while," I said finally. "I hope you don't mind." Her eyes widened in surprise, and then she smiled. That special smile that always made me feel younger. "Of course I don't mind. The guest room is always ready. I'd love your company, Lloyd." I came home that evening with a lighter heart, for the first time in a long time. Tomorrow I'll start packing. Tomorrow I will take the first step toward a new life. A life in which I will no longer be the secret sponsor of my ungrateful son. A life in which I would finally be honest. With Grant, with myself, and perhaps with Trelawney. I knew the days and weeks ahead would not be easy. Grant would not take my decision quietly. There would be scandals, threats, perhaps even lawsuits. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was doing the right thing. That I was doing what I should have done a long time ago. Garth was right. "You don't make decisions like this in haste. I'll give myself a week to think about it." But deep down, I knew I wouldn't change my mind. It was time to end this game of hide and seek and show Grant who had kept his life and business afloat all these years. The week at the Trelawney house flew by. I moved the bare essentials, clothes, medicine, a few books, and photo albums. The rest stayed at my house where I stopped by every morning to check the mail and water the plants. Not that Grant had shown any interest in my whereabouts. He hadn't called once in all those days. Friday morning after breakfast, I decided to stop by the house for a fresh shirt. Trelawney and I were going to the theater tonight. The last time I'd been there the day before, everything was fine. But when I pulled up in a cab to my house, I noticed a familiar car at the gate. Patty's silver Lexus. It was weird. She usually never visited me. I paid the cabbie and walked slowly toward the house, wondering what could have brought my sister-in-law here. As I got closer, I saw that the front door was ajar. Inside, I could hear voices, Patty and Grant. They obviously hadn't expected to see me here. I stopped at the door, hesitant to enter. Something in their tone made me listen. "Perfect timing," Patty said. "He was clearly starting to give up. Did you see the way he forgot the neighbor's name last week? And then his sudden tantrum at dinner. If we apply now, we have a good chance." "I don't know, Pat." Grant's voice sounded uncertain. "He's my father, after all. A father who never cared for you." she said sharply. Look, darling, it's the only way out. We're in debt. Our business is on the verge of bankruptcy, and he's sitting on a pile of money and refuses to help. If we get a guardianship and put him in Sunny Hills, we can sell this house and solve our problems. I froze, not believing my ears. Sunny Hills is the local nursing home, not the worst, but not the best either. And the guardianship, they were really planning on declaring me incompetent. But that would require a medical report, Grant continued hesitantly. Doctors can't prove he's out of his mind. That's what Dr. Harrison is for, Patty replied confidently. He owed me a favor after that incident with his son at school. Besides, your father has really gotten forgetful. And those long walks he takes around town, who knows? Maybe one day he'll get lost and won't be able to find his way home. I felt nausea coming to my throat. They hadn't just discussed it, they'd already made a plan. And Patty was willing to use her position in city government to manipulate the doctor. You're right, I guess. Grant's voice became firmer. Let's look around, see what we can sell right away. I heard their footsteps in the living room. They were already appraising my possessions. Unable to listen any longer, I pushed open the door and entered. What are you doing in my house? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. Patty flinched and turned toward me with the expression of a startled doe caught in the headlights of a car. Grant, who was standing by the bookcase with a glass at 10 o'clock in the morning, jerked so violently that he spilled his whiskey on the carpet. Papa? He exclaimed with feigned surprise. We were worried about you. You didn't answer the phone. You didn't call, I replied dryly. And you don't have the keys to my house. How did you get in? They looked at each other, clearly not expecting a direct question. We have a spare key, Patty said uncertainly. Just in case. You gave it to us, don't you remember? That was a lie. I never gave them the key. So they made a duplicate without my knowledge, or they picked the lock. I remember perfectly well that I never gave you the key, Patty, I replied, feeling the anger building up inside me. Just as I remember my neighbor's name, Eleanor Baxter, 82 years old, with 3 grandchildren and bad joints. I'm not forgetful. I just didn't think it was necessary to correct you when you called her Evelyn. Patty's face stretched. She clearly hadn't expected me to have heard their conversation. Lloyd, she began conciliatorily. You misunderstood. I got it right, I interrupted her. You plan to declare me incompetent, put me in a nursing home, and sell my house to pay off Grant's debts. And you're going to use your connections to get a false medical opinion. Grant stepped forward, his face flushed with anger or shame, or more likely both at once. How dare you eavesdrop? It's low. Low? I grinned involuntarily. It's low to barge into someone's house and plan how to deprive them of their freedom for money. And eavesdropping on those plans is self-defense. Self-defense? Grant snorted. From what? From caring? We're worried about you. You live alone. It's dangerous at your age. Don't lie now, I shook my head. You never cared about me, only about my money, and how you could blame me for all your failures. He took another step toward me, his eyes narrowing. You have no idea what I've been through. While you were sitting in your ivory tower counting money, I was trying to build a business from scratch, without any help from you. I sighed. How many times had we been through this conversation before? But today would be different. Today, I would finally tell the truth. Without any help from me? I looked him straight in the eye. Grant, who do you think paid the down payment on your office? Who covered your debts to your suppliers last year? Who financed the purchase of new equipment? He blinked, clearly confused. I took out a loan. I had investors. There are no investors, Grant. All the money came from me, through a chain of shell companies. I'm a major investor in your business. I own a controlling interest in Weatherby Transportation Solutions. There was a deafening silence. Grant looked at me as if I had just informed him that I was, in fact, an alien from Mars. Patty looked from me to her husband and back again, her mouth hanging open in amazement. That's impossible, Grant finally said. You're lying. Oh? Why would I lie? I asked calmly. Call Marcus Jenkins, your CFO. Ask him who really pays his salary. Or Helen Foster, your chief accountant. They both work for me. So does most of your senior management. No. Grant shook his head, refusing to believe it. No, this is bullshit. You're just trying to confuse us because we found out about your money. Ah, what money, Grant? I allowed myself a slight smile. The one I invested in your business? The money I spent paying off your gambling debts? The ones that went into fixing up your house and car? I watched the expression on his face change from disbelief to doubt, from doubt to shock. He knew I was telling the truth. Too many details, too specific amounts. But why? He exhaled. Why hide it? Because you would never accept help from me directly, I answered simply. You're too proud and too angry with me. You'd rather go bankrupt than take a dime from me. And I couldn't let you ruin your life for your mother's memory. The mention of Veta was like pulling the cork out of a bottle of Grant's emotions. Don't you dare speak of her, he shouted. Don't you dare use her name to justify your manipulations. You've controlled her your whole life, and now you're trying to control me. He turned to me, his eyes burning with hatred. You ruined my life, he screamed in my face. You ruined everything. Get out, and don't come back. At that moment, I realized that further conversation was pointless. Grant was too angry, too drunk, too fixated on his version of events to hear anything else. He wasn't ready for the truth, not now, and perhaps not ever. Instead of my usual submissiveness, instead of trying to justify myself or reassure him, I just nodded. All right, Grant, I'll leave. But remember, I warned you. The next day, I put my plan into action. I called Garth, and we set in motion the process of stopping all hidden financial infusions into Grant's business. The paperwork was sent, the controlling interest officially transferred into my name. My son would soon learn what it meant to be left without the support he had relied on so much, without even realizing it. It's amazing how quickly a person's life can change in a month. Back in early February, I was still living in my old house, secretly supporting my son's business and tolerating his scorn. Now, in early March, I was renting a small but cozy apartment in downtown Great Falls, spending evenings with Trelawney, and feeling truly free for the first time in years. Garth helped me find it. It was a one-bedroom, on the third floor of an old but well-repaired building overlooking the city park. I'd moved only the bare necessities clothes, a few books, pictures of Veta, and a few memorabilia. I left the rest in the house, which I'd decided not to sell, despite Garth's advice. Are you sure? He asked. It's a big house and you're the only one there, and it costs a lot of money to keep. I'm sure, I said. It's Veta's house, and who knows, it might still be useful. Garth shook his head, but didn't insist. He knew me too well. I hadn't seen Grant once this month. I hadn't called him, or written him, or taken a direct interest in his affairs. But, of course, I was aware of everything that was going on. Marcus Jenkins, the CFO of Weatherby Transportation Solutions, now reported directly to me, not to shell companies like before, and his reports were disappointing. Minus Mr. Weatherby, he'd said during our last meeting at a cafe on the edge of town where no one knew us. The company is in critical condition. We've lost 3 major clients in the last month. Creditors are demanding repayment. Office and warehouse rent bills are overdue. If nothing changes in the next 2 weeks, we'll have to declare bankruptcy. And Grant? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Marcus wrinkled his nose. Minus Mr. Grant. He's not in the best shape. He comes into the office irregularly, often hungover, yells at employees, blames everyone for the company's problems. A lot of people have already quit. I nodded. That's what I expected. Grant had never been good at dealing with adversity. Instead of looking for solutions, he looked for blame and solace in the bottle. Keep me informed, I said to Marcus. And remember, no financial injections without my direct orders. He nodded and walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the cooling coffee. Trelawney never asked about Grant unless I started the conversation myself. She sensed that the subject was still painful to me, despite my determination to see it through. But that night, when I returned from my meeting with Marcus, she noticed my mood. "Bad news?" she asked, setting a cup of mint tea in front of me just the way I liked it. "Expected," I replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "Grant's company is on the verge of bankruptcy. He himself is, you know." She nodded and sat across from me at the small kitchen table. We often spent our evenings like this, drinking tea, talking, sometimes playing chess or listening to music, simple pleasures that I couldn't afford all those years of living in constant tension, maintaining my lies. "Do you think he'll come to you?" Trelawney asked after a long pause. "He'll have to sooner or later," I shrugged, "when he realizes there's no way out. The only question is how much pride he'll have to swallow." She looked at me carefully. "And what will you tell him when he comes?" I wondered. It was a question that had preoccupied me from the beginning. What will I say to Grant when he finally shows up on the doorstep, humiliated and angry? Would I be triumphant? Would I take revenge for all those years of neglect and rudeness? Or will I just silently hand him all the documents that prove my case? "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I guess it all depends on how he behaves, and whether he'll really realize what he's done." Trelawney nodded. She always understood me right off the bat. Grant showed up 3 days later, no warning, no call. He just showed up on the doorstep of my new apartment in the late afternoon, when Trelawney and I were about to go to bed. The doorbell was insistent, almost aggressive. I knew immediately who it was. Trelawney did too. "I'm going to retire to my bedroom," she said quietly. "You two need to talk in private." I nodded gratefully and went to open the door. Grant looked terrible. Thin, unshaven, with red eyes and shaking hands. He smelled of stale booze and despair. He stood leaning against the door jamb as if he might fall without it. "Grant," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." He walked silently into the apartment, looking around with ill-concealed surprise. I guess he'd expected something more luxurious. Or, on the contrary, more squalid, something to regret or laugh at. "Sit down," I pointed to the couch in the small living room. "Would you like some tea? Coffee?" "Whiskey," he replied hoarsely, sinking heavily onto the couch. "If you have any." "No," I shook my head. "Just tea or coffee. You've had enough." He snorted, but didn't argue. "Coffee then, black, no sugar." I nodded and went into the kitchen. I needed this pause to collect my thoughts. I'd been waiting for this moment for a month, but now that it had come, I felt strangely confused. In front of me was not just the man who had caused me so much pain. This was my son, my only child, a part of me and Veta. When I returned with 2 cups of coffee, Grant was sitting with his head low and his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Here," I set the cup in front of him. "Drink it while it's hot." He took the cup but didn't drink it. He just held it, staring at the dark liquid, as if he could find the answers to all his questions there. "You were right," he said finally, so quietly I could barely hear him. "About the company, the investors, all of it." I waited in silence for him to continue. "Oh, Marcus showed me the documents. All the documents, for 5 years. Every payment, every transfer, every investor." He looked up at me with a look of pain and anger. "Why the hell not? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Would you have accepted my help?" I asked calmly. "If I had come to you and said, 'Son, your business is unprofitable. Let me invest and save it'?" He looked away. And that was more eloquent than any answer. You'd rather let the company go under than admit you needed my help, I continued. Your pride has always been stronger than your common sense, Grant, ever since high school. Remember when you quit soccer because the coach said you needed more practice? You chose to quit the team rather than admit he was right. That was a long time ago, he muttered. But nothing's changed. I sipped my coffee. When your company started losing money, you chose to blame the economy, your competitors, your customers, anyone but yourself. And you certainly wouldn't ask me for help. So you decided to do it in secret? There was a hint of anger in his voice again. Play God behind my back? I decided to help my son in the only way he could accept, I answered. Through front men, through sham investments, so you could keep your pride and not go completely bankrupt. He was silent for a long time. He drank his coffee in small sips, avoiding looking me in the eye. And now, you've decided to end it all, he said finally. To show me who was really the boss all these years. No, Grant. I decided to end it because you were planning to declare me incompetent and lock me in a nursing home to get my money. Or, have you already forgotten that conversation with Patty? He wrinkled his nose as if in sudden pain. It was her idea, not mine. But you didn't object, I pointed out. You didn't tell her it was wrong, that it was, in fact, a crime against your father. I was desperate, he raised his voice. The company was sinking. Creditors were calling every day. Patty was threatening to leave if I didn't solve the financial problems. And where is she now? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He lowered his eyes. She left 2 weeks ago. Said she didn't sign up for a life with a loser. I felt a prick of regret. Not for Patty. I'd never had warm feelings for her, for Grant. Whatever he was my son, and seeing him so broken was painful. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. You are? He looked at me questioningly. You're sorry that my life is falling apart after you pulled the support out from under my business. I'm sorry you're hurting, I replied. But I don't regret my decision. You had to finally see reality, Grant. That your business had never been self-sufficient. That it couldn't exist without my support. And now what? He asked bitterly. Do you expect me to crawl on my knees before you? To beg for help? Admit what a worthless son and businessman I am? No, I shook my head. I'm waiting for you to grow up and take responsibility for your life. No blaming, no fault-finding, no alcohol as an escape from your problems. He grinned bitterly. Easy for me to say. My business is on the verge of bankruptcy. My wife's gone. The house is about to be foreclosed on. Where do I go? What do I do? I took an envelope out of my pocket and put it on the table between us. Here are all the documents, I said. Proof that I've been financing your business all these years. Account statements, contracts, all the transfers of funds. I want you to study them carefully, so you can see the whole picture. He hesitantly took the envelope but didn't open it. Why? To humiliate me further? To make you realize the magnitude, I answered. To realize how much money I've invested in your company, how many times I've saved it from bankruptcy, how many of your personal debts I've paid off. He reluctantly opened the envelope and began to look through the documents. I watched his expression change from skeptical to shocked, from shocked to stunned. This is millions, he breathed out, flipping through the pages. In 5 years, you've put more than $3 million into the company? $3,427,000 to be exact, I nodded. Plus about $500,000 more for your personal needs, card debt, home improvements, a new car for Patty. He looked up at me with a look of disbelief and confusion. But where did you get that kind of money? You've always lived modestly. Mom told me you saved money on everything. I did save money, I agreed. But not out of stinginess, as your mother thought. I just never saw the point of ostentatious luxury. And the money. I've invested well, Grant. Very good. Before you were born, I started investing in tech stocks. Apple, Microsoft, later Google, and Amazon. It paid handsome dividends. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time in his life. And all these years you let my mom and I think we were barely making ends meet? That we didn't have money for a good school for me? A vacation abroad? A new car? We had money for everything we needed, I replied calmly. For a good, though not elite school. For a vacation, though not in five-star hotels. For a reliable, though not luxury car. I wanted you to grow up appreciating money and labor, not taking wealth for granted. Is that why you refused to pay for my college? The bitterness was back in his voice. No, I shook my head. I refused to pay for your college because you were skipping high school, drinking, and showing no interest in your studies. I offered you a deal. If you earned your own money for the first semester and did well, I'd pay for the rest. But you didn't last 3 months on the job. Because it was a dirty, humiliating job, he blurted out. It was honest work, I countered. Like any other job. There is no degrading work, Grant. There's only a degrading attitude. He turned away, clenching his fists. I could see anger and shame, old resentments, and new understandings struggling in him. What now? He asked after a long pause. What happens to the company? That's up to you, I answered. I can sell it, I have several offers. Or we can try to save it together. But on new terms. He looked at me suspiciously. What conditions? You're in treatment for alcohol addiction. Completely. No exceptions, no excuses. Then we'll restructure the company. I'll remain the majority owner, but you'll be the managing director, with real responsibility and real accountability. No hidden injections, no fake investors. Everything is transparent. And if I say no? He tried to speak firmly, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Then I'll sell the company and you'll have to look for work elsewhere, I shrugged. It's your choice, Grant. I'm not going to decide for you anymore. He was silent for a long moment, staring at the papers on the table. I didn't rush him. It was a decision he had to make on his own, without pressure from me. Why are you offering me this chance in the first place? He finally asked. After everything I've said to you? After I blamed you for my mom's death? For ruining my life? Because you're my son, I answered simply. The only one. And no matter what, I love you. I always have. He lowered his head, and I saw his shoulders shake. He was crying for the first time in my memory since Veta died. He cried, unbidden, unashamed of his tears. I don't deserve this, he whispered. I've been a terrible son, ungrateful, cruel. Maybe, I agreed. But you can still change, if you really want to. He lifted his crying face to me, and for a moment I saw in him the little boy he'd once been. Open, vulnerable, seeking approval. I want to, he said quietly. I'm so tired of all this. The anger, the guilt, of the alcohol, from the constant feeling that I'll never be good enough. Then we have a chance, I smiled weakly. I can't promise it'll be easy. The company is in bad shape, and you'll have to work hard to rebuild it, and even more to rebuild yourself. I know, he nodded. I'm willing to try. I really am. I held out my hand to him. Then let's start over. No accusations, no old grudges. Just father and son trying to build something together. He froze for a moment, staring at my outstretched hand. Then he shook it firmly. I agree. In that moment, I felt something inside me that had been compressed and tense for years finally begin to relax. It wasn't completely gone. Too much pain had built up over the years. But it got lighter. It was as if the weight I'd been carrying all this time had become a little less. Of course, I wasn't naive. I knew that one conversation wouldn't magically change Grant. That his drinking problem, his temper formed by years of resentment and self-deception, wouldn't disappear overnight. that we had a long and difficult road ahead of us. But that night, when he left, not empty-handed, but with a plan of action and perhaps a glimmer of hope, I allowed myself to believe that we were moving in the right direction. Trelawney came out of the bedroom as the door closed behind Grant. She wasn't eavesdropping, I knew that, just waiting for us to finish our conversation. "How did it go?" she asked, sitting down next to me on the couch. "Better than I expected," I answered honestly. "Worse than I'd hoped, but at least he saw the truth, and maybe he's ready to change." "That's a lot," she put her hand on mine. "You gave him a chance, Lloyd. It's up to him now." I nodded, looking at the papers still spread out on the table. Proof of my years of lying and, at the same time, of my love for my son. The strange, convoluted history of our family, laid out in numbers and legal terms. "You know," I said, turning to Trelawney, "when I started this whole plan, I wanted to teach him a lesson, to show him that he's nothing without me. But now I realize that the true goal was different. I wanted him to finally see me, not as an enemy, not as a nuisance, but as a father who, no matter what, was always there for him." "And he did," she said softly. "Maybe not completely, not right away. But it was a start." I nodded, feeling a strange mixture of fatigue and relief. The month of tension and waiting was finally over. There was an unknown future ahead, with new challenges, new conversations, perhaps new conflicts. But something had changed, something fundamental. That night, for the first time in a long time, I slept without dreams. Just the deep, peaceful sleep of a man who had finally spoken the truth and been heard. Hope is a strange thing. It can persist even when reason tells you it shouldn't. It lives in spite of everything. In spite of experience, in spite of logic, in spite of the most obvious facts. Like a weed pushing through the asphalt. Stubborn, illogical, but surprisingly resilient. I hoped that our conversation with Grant would actually make a difference. That his tears, his promises, were genuine. That we would finally begin to build the kind of relationship I'd always dreamed of. A relationship based on mutual respect and understanding, not lies and manipulation. For the first 2 weeks, it seemed like that would be the case. Grant did enroll in rehab, for an outpatient program, true, not inpatient treatment as I'd advised, but it was still progress. He called me regularly, telling me about his progress, giving me advice about the company. We even met twice for lunch, awkward, tense meetings in which both of us carefully avoided painful topics, but meetings nonetheless. Marcus Jenkins, who continued to keep me informed about the company, also noted positive changes. "Minus Mr. Grant is much more focused," he said the last time we met. "He comes into the office every day, works late. He's had several successful negotiations with clients we almost lost. Of course, the financial situation is still difficult, but there are some improvements." I nodded as I listened to these reports and allowed myself to hope. Maybe, I thought, my plan had worked better than I had expected. Maybe Grant really is capable of change if given the right encouragement and support. Trelawney, however, was more cautious in her assessment. "Don't jump to conclusions," she said when I told her about Grant's progress. "Such changes are rarely instantaneous and irreversible, especially when alcohol problems and long-standing resentments are involved." She turned out to be right, as always. The change happened in early May, almost 2 months after our conversation. I was supposed to meet Grant at a restaurant to discuss the company's new growth strategy. He was half an hour late, which was unusual for his new, more responsible image. When he finally showed up, I knew something was wrong. His eyes were red, not from tears, but from alcohol. He tried to hide it by chewing mint gum and keeping a straight face, but I knew the signs all too well. "Sorry I'm late," he said, sitting down across from me. got held up in a meeting with a client. I didn't confront him about lying. Instead, I decided to give him a chance to explain himself. "How are you doing?" I asked him in a neutral tone. "How's the rehab going?" He looked away, and that was more eloquent than any answer. "Hmm, it's okay," he mumbled. "Although, to be honest, I think I've exaggerated my problems. The doctor says I don't have a serious addiction, just a stress reaction to difficult circumstances." I doubted that the doctor actually said anything like that. It was probably Grant's interpretation, convenient for his self-justification. "And that's why you're drinking again?" I asked bluntly. He flinched, clearly not expecting such bluntness. "I didn't," he started, but stopped when he saw the look in my eyes. "Okay, I've had a drink. Just a little bit. Just a glass of wine at lunch with a client. That doesn't count as a breakdown." "Any alcohol consumption during rehab counts as a breakdown, Grant," I argued gently. "You know that." He frowned, and I could see the familiar anger in his eyes. "Are you an expert on alcoholism now?" he asked sharply. "Or you just can't pass up the chance to tutor me? Supervise me?" I sighed. "Here we go. I'm not controlling you, Grant. I'm worried. There's a difference." "Really?" He grinned bitterly. "Seems to me all you do is control. First secretly, through your investments and your front men. Now openly, through your worry and concern." I felt something inside me clench. It was the old Grant, angry, blaming, not taking responsibility for his actions. "If you see caring as a form of control, I'm sorry," I said quietly. "But the fact remains that you broke our agreement. One of the conditions was that you complete a full course of rehabilitation, no exceptions." "Oh, that's it," he leaned back in his chair. "Now you're going to threaten me. If I'm not a good boy and don't follow your rules, you're going to take my company away from me, aren't you?" "Not take it away, sell it," I corrected. "That was part of our agreement, Grant. You agreed to those terms." "Because I had no choice." He raised his voice, and several customers at neighboring tables turned around. "You put me in a corner. Either I play by your rules or I'm left with nothing." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You had a choice, Grant. You always have. You could refuse my help and get a job. Start from scratch, on your own. But you chose to accept my terms because it was easier." "Easier?" He almost spit the word out. "You call that easy? Being accountable to you for every move? Having to endure your judgmental looks? Feeling like a failure every time you walk into the office?" "I've never given you a reason to feel like a failure," I countered. "On the contrary, I've always celebrated your successes, supported your initiatives." Oh, yes, of course," he grinned. "A big-hearted daddy who condescends to praise his worthless son. You know what I've realized in these last 2 months? That you never saw me as an equal. You never believed I could accomplish anything on my own." "That's not true, Grant." I shook my head. "I've always believed in your potential. That's why I supported your business all these years instead of letting it fall apart. You supported it because you wanted to control me." Now he couldn't keep his voice down. "You wanted me to remain dependent on you without even realizing it. That's not support. That's manipulation." I realized that the conversation had reached an impasse. Grant was back to his usual role of victim, looking for someone to blame for all his problems. And as usual, I was the one to blame. "I think we should end this conversation," I said, beckoning the waiter over. "You're in no condition to discuss company business." "Oh, now you refuse to even talk to me?" He grinned evilly. "Typical tactic. When you can't control the conversation, you just walk away." I paid for our untouched drinks and stood up. "Call me when you're ready to have a constructive conversation, Grant. No accusations and no alcohol." "You won't!" he shouted after me as I headed for the exit. "I'm not doing your bidding anymore. I've had enough of your control." I left the restaurant with a heavy heart. The hope I'd worked so hard to maintain for the past 2 months had finally faded. Grant hadn't changed. He probably never would. He would always see my actions as controlling and manipulative, regardless of my true motives. Trelawney was waiting for me at home. We'd started living together a month after I'd moved into the new apartment, first just for convenience, then because we'd realized it was better for both of us. Nothing official, no big words or promises. Just two lonely people who found in each other support and understanding on the slope of years. She noticed my mood right away. "The meeting didn't go well," she said, not asking, but saying. "He snapped," I answered briefly, sinking into the chair, "and blamed it on me, of course." Trelawney nodded as if she'd expected this turn of events. "You gave him a chance, Lloyd, in more ways than one. Now it's time to think about yourself." I knew she was right, but it wasn't easy to accept. "He's my son, Trelawney," I said quietly. "My only child. How can I just turn my back on him?" "You don't turn away," she said softly. "You accept reality as it is. Grant is a grown man who makes his own choices, and you have to respect those choices, even if you think they're wrong." I was silent for a long time, pondering her words. She didn't rush me, just sat there, giving me space to think. "You're right," I finally said. "I should let him go. Let him live his life with all its consequences. And live mine," she added. "You deserve peace, Lloyd. You deserve happiness." That night I called Garth and told him my decision. He listened to me without surprise. I guess he expected it too. "What exactly do you want to do?" he asked. I will leave Grant a minimal stake in the company," I answered. "Enough to give him a modest living, but no more than that. I'll sell the controlling interest you've had interesting offers from several transportation companies. And the rest of the fortune? Most of it to charities, as we discussed earlier. Some of it into an account for Trelawney, in case something happens to me. And I also want to start a VETA scholarship fund for medical students specializing in oncology." Garth hummed approvingly. "That's a good decision. VETA would be pleased." "I hope so," I sighed. "You know, she always believed Grant would grow up, be responsible, find his own way." "Maybe he will," Garth said. "Just not the way you hoped, and not with your help." "Maybe," I agreed without much conviction. The next few weeks were spent in paperwork and negotiations with potential buyers of Weatherby Transportation Solutions. Grant had been out of touch the whole time. No calls, no messages. Only through Marcus did I know that he continued to come to the office, although increasingly depressed or tipsy. When all the paperwork was done, I asked Marcus to give Grant an envelope with the documents and a short letter from me. In the letter, I explained my decision. No accusations, no recriminations, just the facts. I was leaving him 10% of the company, which provided a steady, though not luxurious income. The rest would go to the new owners, a large transportation corporation that promised to keep the jobs and even expand the business. I didn't expect gratitude or understanding, and I didn't get it. 2 days after I received the documents, Grant showed up at my apartment, drunk, angry, his face contorted with rage. "You did it after all," he shouted, standing on the doorstep. "You took away my company. You robbed me of everything." "I didn't take it away. I sold my share," I said calmly, not inviting him in. "Your 10% stays with you. That's enough for a normal life if you manage your money wisely." 10%, he laughed bitterly. "A handout. Alms for a beggar. And you've certainly made a fortune out of this deal. The money from the sale will go to charity," I said. "And scholarships for medical students. I'm not keeping a dime for myself." That seemed to confuse him for a moment, but only for a moment. "How noble," he went back to shouting. "To give everything to strangers, but not to your own son. This is your last revenge, isn't it? One last way to show how worthless I am." I shook my head. "It's not revenge, Grant. It's my choice to use my money as I see fit. just like it's your choice to keep drinking and blaming everyone else for your problems. Fuck you. He took a step toward me, and I could smell the alcohol. You've never been a real father to me. You've always been judgmental, controlling, manipulative. Even my mom saw it. She told me how you smothered her with your stinginess, your rules. I felt something finally break inside me. The last thread that bound me to this man who was my son only biologically, but never spiritually. Goodbye, Grant, I said quietly. I hope that one day you will find peace. And forgive yourself, because that's what you need most. I closed the door, ignoring his yelling and banging. A few minutes later, he left. I heard his car door slam. Part of me was worried that he'd gotten behind the wheel like that, but the other part, the bigger part, just felt tired and oddly relieved. Trelawney, who had tactfully retreated to another room during this scene, now returned and silently hugged me. We stood like that for a long time, two elderly people embraced in the middle of the small apartment that had suddenly become our home together. It's over, I said at last. Really over. No, she said softly. It's just beginning. Your new life. Our life. I looked at her in surprise. We'd never talked about our situation in those terms. Never put a name to what was happening between us. Ours? I interjected. She smiled. That special smile that always made me feel younger. If you want to, of course. I'm not rushing things. I want to, I answered without hesitation. I really want to. That night we sat on the small balcony of our apartment for a long time, looking out at the city, which was falling asleep under the starry sky. Trelawney talked about her plans. She wanted to get back to volunteering at the library, perhaps organize a reading group for the elderly. I talked about my desire to travel, not luxuriously but simply, visiting places I'd always wanted to see but never found the time. We made plans, modest, realistic plans of two people who didn't have much time left, but who were determined to live it fully and meaningfully. We didn't talk about Grant, not because the subject was taboo, but because it was exhausted. I had done everything I could for my son. I'd loved him, supported him, forgiven him, given him chances over and over again. Now it was time to let him go, not out of revenge or resentment, but out of respect for his choices and for my own life. That night I slept a peaceful, deep sleep. No disturbing dreams, no sudden awakenings in a cold sweat. I knew that there would be hard days ahead, days when I would question my decision, days when I would long for the son I never truly knew. But I also knew I had made the right choice. I woke up this morning with a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in decades. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying all my life had finally fallen from my shoulders. I was free. From the lies, from the manipulation, from the toxic relationships that had sucked the life out of me. Trelawney was already in the kitchen making breakfast. A normal, everyday scene, but it held a special meaning for me. It was my new reality, simple, honest, without ulterior motives or hidden agendas. "Good morning," she said, smiling. "How did you sleep?" "Good," I answered, and it was true. Better than I had in the last 20 years.